Back in school from spring break, in one of my classes, we all get kicked in the junk. Stand by. Hey everybody, I'm James. Welcome back to RATTLECAN Fab Shop, and we're going to talk about what I learned this week in school. Well, last week was spring break, and there's a pretty good possibility that I was ill during my spring break, and something that I don't ever get to do, I took a nap, or 6. So I had a list of stuff to do as long as a giraffe's neck. None of that stuff got done. Oh well, it's just kind of like a time warp that I took. Back in school on Monday, my very first class, we walked in and our instructor had quit with like no notice. I believe that's what we call poor form. And yeah, that was just really uncool. We wish him the best. Not really, but that's what my mother says I'm supposed to do. The quizzes that we had supposed to have been taking, and the PowerPoints that we had supposed to have been reviewing, and the videos that we were supposed to have been reviewing, none of that had been done. The sheet metal learning that we were supposed to be doing was actually coming from the shop tech, because apparently he's got little to no background in sheet metal shop, so it's an interesting time. So now we're trying to play catch up for the first 8 weeks of the semester, and it'll be fun. It'll be a challenge, and we'll see who rises to the challenge. And the new guy seems all right. He seems like the kind of guy like I used to be when I was a scoutmaster. The 6 o'clock meeting starts at 6 o'clock. And I like that because I got no tolerance for people who can't be bothered to show up on time. So now we got a weld test next week. We've done a pad of beads one day. We learned horizontal fillet welds the other day. Now we're getting tested on them. That's the way it goes. Monday night in open lab, I may have mentioned that I had made a boo-boo on my high-speed steel cutting bit. The saying is that the enemy of good is perfection, and I thought I could do something to my tool bit to make it better, and it didn't work that way. And despite a lot of efforts, I couldn't get it back to the way it was. So I have acquired some new high-speed steel blanks, and on my own dime, and went in Monday, ground a new bit. Now I'm back in business. I also may have mentioned in a previous episode that I was going to build something to try to control the runaway RPM event on my lathe. So I came up with this, and it actually works pretty well. It's not going to keep, if you rub up against that knob, it's still going to move, but it's not going to move from 360 RPM to 1200 RPM like it has done in the past. So consider that a success. Tuesday, starting to sound like a broken record. Numbers matter. This is a picture of what the chips should look like at the prescribed feeds and speeds and the prescribed depth of cut that we're supposed to be doing. Now, the first cut that I got on this day looked like this. Very similar to a front coil spring on a 78 Monte Carlo. So I went to my teacher and I said, sir, I don't know what's wrong with this, but this is wrong. And he chuckled and agreed with me, and we went and looked at my lathe, and we found on this chart that dictates your feeds and speeds, there's a part where these two charts overlap, and those are not equivalencies. So if you mistakenly dial in the combination on the left, it does not equal the combination over on the right. It rapidly increases your feed. So I think it's kind of a poorly laid out graphic. I would have at least put a line down the middle of those two digits, those two charts, so that you could know that those are definitely not equivalents. But it's a live and learn kind of thing. So no harm, no foul. And actually my tool held up very well. He said he was impressed at the fact that I just didn't break my tool off. So we got that going for us. And in the middle of the week, we kind of started on laying out a project for a friend of the channel, Jay. We're working on this gas tank of his. He brought it over, and we're starting to work out the dimensions on a test piece in order to build a shelf and drop the top part of that fuel tank down so that we can install some big fancy fuel pump for his car. So he dropped that by, and we started kind of looking at that. Wednesday night in CAM class, I made another pretty sign. I took a test, turned in my assignment. It looked like it was going to go okay. And then as a additional kind of an activity, just to get you some, we call it stick time, hands-on time with the machines, we made these little placards. And it was an interesting exercise because we had been mistakenly handed a piece of 5/8 aluminum, and we should have, which we used to do our tool offsets with, and we should have been handed a piece of 1/2-inch aluminum. So when we ran our first one, it sounded somewhat aggressive, but the Haas plowed through it. And then when we put the second piece on, which was my piece, it squared off the ends just fine. But then when it started running that perimeter channel around there, it didn't make hardly any noise at all. And that's when we raised our hand and said, please help us. What's going on? And then we started looking through what was going on, and we noticed this stack of blanks, and there were a couple of these thicker plates that were mixed in there. So I guess the good thing about that is it's good that we didn't do our tool offsets on the 1/2-inch piece and then load up the 5/8-inch piece, because that could have been not gooder. So anyways, that's what we did. And we have our big midterm exam coming up this next week. We have a 2-hour limit, and we are basically all of that programming that you have seen me post about over the past 2 weeks. You get a problem like that, and you have 2 hours to write your program. So, and then after that, we're on to CNC lathes. So that's what's going on there. Thursday in metrology class, we were learning about gauge blocks and ringing gauge blocks, and using them to do comparisons between a part and what the standard should be, and just a kind of another tool in the tool belt on how to measure things, which is coming in quite handy, because I'm now finally starting to get to the point where some of the things that we're talking about in metrology class is actually being used in the shops, other than just measuring stuff with a micrometer and finding out how bad I screwed something up. If you haven't seen it, I'll post a link up in the corner there, where we got a new tool. Had a treat yourself day, and bought myself a brand new tool. It's probably not going to happen again. I've bought a new car one time, and I'm probably never going to do that again. There's something about tried and true used tools that kind of fits my cheap, penny pinching way of life. So anyways, you can go check that out if you want to. And I did actually take a couple of pictures because I went in on Thursday evening. No, that was Friday. It would have been Friday morning when I went in on Open Labs. And I actually worked ahead and made my first single point threads. And thankfully, one of the shop guys walked by, and he kind of looked at what I was doing, because I'd asked him a couple of questions about stuff, and he came by and he looked, and he asked me if I had made this one setting, and it turned out I had not made this one setting. So the angle in which my piece was driving into that thread was way too shallow, and I was basically just, as I was making a thread, I was cutting off the base of the next thread coming next to it. So luckily he had noticed that and brought it to my attention. I was able to kind of work through a couple of things and save it. So I mean, it actually works now, and I'm quite happy that it did. I'm a little bit ahead in that class. And in that class, that also leads me to, I got some good news in that there's very limited offerings for school this summer. And one of the classes that I was interested in had 2 prerequisites. I asked my instructor if there was a way, is there a possibility that I could ask for a waiver on that and get into the class? And turns out that there was, and it was granted. So now I'm able to take at least one CAM class in the shortened summer time period, along with lovely classes like personal communications and what else am I taking? Math for technologists, and I believe I'm taking PC apps for engineers. And I may have changed my certificate program to an associate's program. Maybe. And then today is Saturday, and I spent it sitting down, doing my homework and studying for a test. So that's what I did this week. Anyways, I will let you know if anything more exciting happens next week. Hopefully, it will be a much more calm week without the stressful beginning that we had. And you just gotta, stuff happens, and you just have to adapt to it. It's not about what happens. It's about how you react to it. Kind of a glass half full kind of guy, I guess. Anyways, if you've got comments, put them in the comment section down beneath the sermon notes. If you think this was at least mildly entertaining, give us a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, hit the little bell next to the subscribe button, and that way when the old guy comes on and tells you how his bowl of Vietnamese pho about burned his throat out, you'll get a chuckle out of that. Thanks for hanging out with me. We'll see you next week. Cheers. Thanks for taking the time out of your day to spend it here with me. Hope you enjoyed this video. Here's one that you might enjoy as well. If you're not already subscribed, be sure to hit that button, hit the bell next to it so that you get a notification when we drop a new video. If you've got comments, put them down beneath the sermon notes. And remember, if I can do it, you can do it. You guys have a great weekend. Cheers.